Okay, the appointed time has arrived. It is 6 o'clock on Thursday, January the 18th, 2018. I'll call this special call meeting of Mayor and Council to order. And we will, hopefully you all have the agendas, or you have your electronic devices so you can see the agendas. Do I hear a motion that we adopt the agenda?
Yeah, I'll move. We adopt the agenda.
Okay.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda, which has one item on it. All in favor? It is unanimous. At this time, we will, did we say we were going to do public comment at the beginning of these meetings? I thought we said special call meetings at the end and regular call meetings at the beginning. Is that correct? Okay.
What we did say is that we would do public comments at the end of work sessions and special call, and at the beginning of regular meetings.
That's what I thought.
But how we do it, I guess we could decide.
We just adopted the agenda, so we'll leave it like this, but in the future, Elisa, we'll do special call meetings and work sessions at the end, and then regular meetings at the beginning. Okay, so at this time, we will open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment, please come forward and do so. State your name and record for the name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
John Hanneback, 3106 Golfers Way. I have signed in. I guess I've been involved with the changes to the city charter from the time the council kind of began these. I sat in one of the meetings that the council had at Tanner Hospital when we started reviewing these, and was involved when you had the consultant come in and make some suggestions that Mr. Mecklin has pretty much adopted and utilized. I wanted to make some comments. I forwarded these to you already, but just to read them into the record, I do support the changes to the city charter that Mr. Mecklin has indicated and marked so in red. But in addition, there are a couple of things that I would like to make sure that are brought to the attention of the council. On page 12, section 3.23, I do support the proposed alternative 1 to remove, on a procedure to remove the city manager. The reason I support 1 is it's much quicker, cleaner than alternative 2. Plus, I can't imagine the council ever retaining a city manager, or the city manager ever considering not having a contract of some kind or an agreement of some kind. So there will be an agreement, I would assume, even under any circumstances. So you will have to deal with that under the alternative 1. And I think it would give a little more focus and attention to the council and in what they agreed to in that original agreement. But I support alternative 1. On page 17, section 510, I advise changing the elections of council members so as to not elect 3 ward council positions in any given single year. That's the way it's currently done. And you could have a situation where you have a brand new council coming on with 3 changes with literally no experience, in the city or whatever. So I would really like to see that changed. I don't know how that would be done, but it might take some significant legislation. I don't know. I don't know how that stands with the state. But I would like to see 2 council elected in 1 year, 2 council elected in another year, and the 5th council person elected in the alternate year. It could lead to some additional costs if there were an additional election. But for instance, if there were an election in 2018, there's already an election, so there wouldn't be an additional cost. And yet we don't have a council position that's viable for right now. But really take a serious look at that, because it could lead to some serious problems if you elect 3 council persons as we just did. And you could elect 3 brand-new people, and I just don't think that's advisable. And, as I've stated several times before, I would like to add term limits for the mayor and the council members, such that no elected official shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms. After sitting out for 1 or more terms, an elected official may serve for 2 more terms, but no elected official shall serve for more than 4 terms regardless of sequence. I just think that's highly desirable. Page 18, section 521, I suggest you might consider a time period that be defined for how soon a special election must be held, unless that's already defined by the elections committee. But the way it's currently stated, there's 12 months before you would call a special election, and that seems kind of long. So, at 12 months into changes that Mr. Mecklin has proposed. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comments portion of the meeting. And before we begin our discussions about the charter, I would like to announce that Councilperson Leslie McPherson has desired to teleconference. She is out of the jurisdiction, and so I believe that our city manager is trying to get in touch with her, or has her on the line now.
Watching the stream.
She is watching, so just for the public that's here, she will be attending the meeting by teleconference. Councilperson Marchman will not be here for the meeting.
Or will be late.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that last part. Okay, so tab A, item number 1 is proposed charter change. And just for the record also, Mr. Hanneback got up and spoke, but I also received an email from Clint Chance. And Mr. Chance, I looked at your information, I have it here, and just for the record, I'd like to read that in. So if anybody else has any emails from the public, I think it's only appropriate that you would read those into the record. Seeing none, we'll begin our discussion. So how do y'all want to do this?
I guess we'll just bring up the things that concern us about it. I had a problem on page 10. That's about the ordinances that are passed are supposed to be promptly given to the mayor. If by some chance they aren't given to him promptly, they skip a day or two, for some reason things happen. Within 10 days of when it's voted on, it goes into effect immediately on the 10th day, so it's going to cut short the mayor's time. I hope the mayor doesn't have a problem with that. So this isn't going to be a conflict, because he doesn't get his full 10 days if it doesn't get to him right away.
I've had a question raised to me whether or not it's really necessary to continue to have 10 days. That, again, that's a policy question for people. Back when these charters were originally drawn up, communication was much different than it is now. People can communicate much quicker through text and emails than they could back when everything had to be written or typed out. So yes, it does need to get to the mayor quickly, but it's also a policy question for you to decide whether or not you still need to have 10 days to exercise a veto.
Well, if it's set to go into effect 10 days after it's adopted, he has whatever period he has during it, as soon as he gets a hold to it, to veto it, whatever he wants to do with it. I guess as long as the mayor's aware that the countdown starts when we pass something.
Okay, well, I think 10 days is too much. The President of the United States has 10 days. The Governor of the state of Georgia has 6 days. So I think that number could certainly be reduced. So that'd be my point. Because we can do things much more efficiently and quicker today than when these were written, and I'd like to see that number reduced. I'm having a problem with my tablet here, so all of my notes for this charter are not coming up, but
You're lucky, mine's at home.
Councilman, what would you like to see that number reduced to?
well, I think that, personally, I think 3 days is enough, but 6 days might be appropriate.
Business days or calendar days?
Calendar days.
It was 10 calendar days, so yeah, it ought to be calendar days, whatever it is.
State law provides that anytime you set a time limitation that is less than 10 days, weekends are excluded from the computation. Anything 10 days or more, weekends are included. So if you set it at something less than 10 days, then you are automatically under state law excluding the counting of Saturday and Sunday.
Which pushes it back out a little bit on calendar time.
So since we typically take actions on Tuesdays,
Right.
then 6 days would occur after the weekend anyway.
Yeah, it'll be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, the next Wednesday.
The 8 calendar days.
You reduced about 2. Reduced about 2 days.
About 3 days.
Then if you take action on Tuesday, then it would
Friday.
require some action by Friday.
I think,
Yeah, that's the way we did it
Well-
at this point.
taking up for the mayor, the only problem with that is, he has to have a little bit of time to think out what he wants to do with something he's opposed to. Like the budget, there's a lot to the budget. He didn't veto the whole budget, he vetoed parts of the budget. So if it's a big ordinance that we're passing, he might need a little more time to go through what he wants to do. I think probably 5 days would be logical.
Well, I've never been mayor and don't ever expect to be, but.
I don't either.
But my observation of mayors in the past is when they have exercised the power of veto, it's generally been after some period of reflection and talking around to different people to decide, to weigh the pluses and the minuses of exercising the veto power. And it's almost trying to gain the pulse of the public and hearing some other opinions rather than just doing it wholly on their own.
We've had mayors that gained the pulse of the rest of the council before exercising the veto to be sure he will stand up.
Speaking as a mayor, most, probably 99% of the things that we would ever pass as a council, 3 days would be more than sufficient for me to decide whether I was going to veto it or not. But the budget is the one thing that does take a little bit more time to look through after we pass it. I can live with 10 days, 3 days if that's the will of the council. So, but
If you think that the next budget, you can go through it within 3 days, then we'll
I
go
can
for
honestly
that.
tell you as your mayor that I hope that I never have to file another veto again.
Well, I would say, as much as we talk about every issue before it gets voted on, we all know by the time we get here, our positions, they rarely change. I think within 3 days after having had something pass, this mayor knows whether or not he's going to veto it, and I personally would like to see it reduced to 3 because it allows us to continue to do business more efficiently. Today we have computers and cell phones and tons of information, and he goes through every bit of it. I'd like to see it reduced.
What you think, Berlin?
You're talking about the budget.
That's the biggest item we have to pass.
If we're talking about the budget, there are times when you veto the whole budget, and there are times when you do line item veto for it. I think in the most extreme, the vetoing the whole budget would be maybe a problem for 3 days. Most of the time, it would simply be 1 or 2 items that you would go back and look at the veto on and go from there. So it's not I think we as a council are trying to move this along as quickly as possible, but to expedite the event or whatever it's going to be, but also to make sure that we cover all the bases that need to be covered. I think 10 days is too long. It just creates more of a concern and more of a problem for the general public. But I also think that 3 days, and what all of you have said, with all the electronics going on, 3 days would be an ample time to veto something, and then you go back over it and find out why.
I'm certainly okay with 3 days as the mayor.
I'd be okay with either with 3 or 5. 5 puts it 1 week. It puts it
3 days puts it within that week. And the other thing that we haven't discussed is sometimes, and again, I'm not I'm not going to will the veto, but the other thing that vetoes do, when you push it out to 10 days, then there are some situations where that would handicap our staff from making decisions.
Yeah. So really, 3 days probably.
3 days would put it within that week.
I got no problem with 3 days. It's the
And I'm-
mayor's problem anyway, not ours, because we get a long time to think about whether or not to override it.
I'm good with 3 to 5 days.
So
Councilperson McPherson said that 3
I don't know if
days.
y'all can hear her. She
she said 3 days was good.
might want to give her a mic.
3 to 5, anything between 3 and 5 days would be fine with me.
So
So I think 3. There's not any specific language in here that does this, and so I just want to float this idea that the presenting of a veto ought to trigger the city clerk to call for a special called meeting within a certain period of time, unless the council agrees not to have that. I just think one should be triggered rather than wait a month to take action on that by default. But then if the council says, no, that's not something we need to take up that quick, then it would be a specific action not to, rather than a specific action to take it up.
But then you have to change the wording of taking the veto up when it says the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Right, and that's why I'm bringing it up here, because it goes to great extent here to say that. And then we even tried to clarify, what that is and how that's defined.
Right.
What's your opinion on that?
The current requirement that it has to be considered by the next regularly scheduled meeting, that's the deadline for it. You can do it earlier by having a called meeting anytime, but you got a deadline by which if you don't do it, it expires.
you took out regular and just said the next meeting, so I agree with that. If we have a call meeting, if it's that important, we'd do a call meeting and do something about it.
Right.
I don't think it ought to be an automatic call meeting.
And if you don't,
It might not be that important to have it done before the next regular meeting.
Right. And I guess that would be the point is, is every veto worth having a special called meeting?
I don't think every veto is worth a call meeting. I think if it's an important.
And let me address that in the light of one other change. It is a fairly different and important change that, if y'all didn't pick up on this, I want to make sure that I bring it to your attention, because I think it's an important policy decision. And that is that our existing ordinance provides that the mayor has the power to veto ordinances. Time and time again over the past 20 years, it has arisen in issues as to whether or not the mayor has the right to veto something that might not have been called an ordinance at the time that it was passed, but, has essentially the same effect as an ordinance. The way I drew this up, and again, but I'm not arguing in favor of it, and that's why I want y'all to make the policy decision, is that this broadens the definition of what the mayor has the right to veto, to make it clear that he has the right to veto an ordinance, a resolution,
Or
essentially
council
whatever else
measure.
you
What
might
would an
call it.
other council measure be?
It's hard to think of an example of it, but there have been times in the past where the minutes of the meeting will show that somebody says well, let's just do this, and everybody chimes in and says, yeah, that's okay with me. That's neither an ordinance or a resolution or anything. I'm trying to step up and keep that from happening as much as it has at times in the past. But there could be times when you take action sitting here in a meeting that it's not really clear exactly what it is. And this is drawn up to say that the mayor can say, I'm vetoing that.
Okay.
I think, so, when you think about it in that context, we're actually working on a document that who knows how long it'll last, but it may outlast all of us sitting here today. And so it's not specific to any mayor. I think that it ought to be more narrow, and I think that there probably was discussion when this was originally written, because what essentially this does, and certainly not in the case we have today, but it sets up a situation where you could have to have a supermajority for everything you pass. Do we see that happening? No, and we certainly don't have it happening here today, but that's what could happen. The council couldn't do anything without having a supermajority. So I think that the way it was written before was probably a lot more intentional than we may think it was. Of course, we shouldn't have examples like you just gave, but we do. The city's fraught with it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I go down to City Hall and ask for, well, where did this come from? How did this happen? I don't know. Let me go research some minutes. Oh, well, they got damaged in a building somewhere. So I'm glad that we're doing a better job of that, but I think we ought to narrow this more than what you've done here, because basically what you said is any action the council takes can be vetoed. And we haven't seen anything like that. I mean, I don't have to keep saying that, but we're presenting a document that future councils will have to live by or go through this whole process that we're going through.
Well, let me just throw out some examples so that it's clear how this comes into play. Assuming that a department head brings something to the council in the course of a meeting and says, I want to buy 25 pickup trucks. It's going to cost us $100,000. And that is passed and approved through a resolution normally. That is not an ordinance. Should the mayor have the ability to veto an action like that? From what you're saying, the answer would be no, that the mayor would not have the ability to veto a motion to purchase vehicles.
If he can get 25 trucks for $100,000.
Pretty sorry, trucks, and it may have been a bad example that I worded.
I understand.
But that's the premise is,
They're beat up old rusted trucks.
yeah.
Then we might want him to be able to do that.
Yeah.
We might not be getting a bargain.
I got no problem with him having the ability to veto whatever things we pass, and we should have enough majority on this council, if it's really important, to override it.
For a long period of time, it has been assumed by several council members that if the council votes on something, the mayor can veto it. Is that true?
Well, that's been the debate over the years on various issues that has come up. It's come to me many times, can the mayor veto it or not? And I've had to go back and look at it and determine whether or not it was something in the form of an ordinance or not. I mean, clearly there can be action taken by the council that is so, I don't want to call it trivial, but so temporary that, you wouldn't think the mayor should be able to veto it. Trying to think of an example, if you decide, the council decides we want to meet at, we don't want to meet at 6:30, we want to meet at 6 o'clock next monthly meeting. Should that be something that the mayor can veto? I mean, that seems like a pretty small, petty thing for the mayor to have to go to the trouble of overriding a veto to take that action. And perhaps one of the, I don't know how we would define it as to what is a major action or what's not a major action.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd pick and choose.
Right. I mean, the way it's drawn up right here, the mayor has got very broad power. Of course, all this has to play into reality. If the mayor is vetoing every action that's coming before the council, something's going on, and the public is going to be concerned about the dysfunction.
Well, in that case, there would probably be a call meeting right after every regular scheduled meeting.
Right.
And we can call it, 3 of us can call a call meeting.
The biggest example of where this was coming up over and over again related to the budget, and finally it became clear that, because there is state law that says any budget amendments have to be done through an ordinance. There have been times in the past where people have made motions to amend the budget by changing it in such and such a way, which really is not stating that it is an ordinance, but every budget amendment has to be in the form of an ordinance according to state law.
Well, I agreed with what you had on here, and I agree to change the 10-day limit down to a 3-day limit on the time he has. That's the only change I see on here on this section.
Councilman McPherson, do you have an opinion on that particular question?
In regards to how a resolution differs from an ordinance?
In regards to what the veto power of the mayor, as it's proposed now by our city attorney, it would be an approved ordinance, resolution, or other council measure.
That pretty well includes everything we pass.
I guess my only question is there something that is minor that's just a resolution? Can there be something that's a resolution that doesn't, meet the standard of an ordinance? Some simple things that, you wouldn't be eligible to be vetoed? It sounds like there's a discrepancy there as to are they the same thing or not.
Resolutions and ordinances are not the same thing. Ordinances are generally thought to be something of a longer term nature that would end up getting put in our code of ordinances. There are some exceptions. I mean, when you pass the budget, that doesn't get put in the code book, but that is an ordinance. When you make a zoning change, that is an ordinance. I mean, if you rezone property, that comes through as an ordinance. Resolutions are generally something of a more temporary nature. I move that we hire the Velcro Pygmies to come play on August the 19th. That is not an ordinance. That is something of a temporary nature that is less than an ordinance.
Okay, I would lean toward simpler things like that not being involved, having a veto. That makes sense?
The only problem with that is that leaves out the resolution or other council measure, because other council measure covers it all. That brings us back down to just ordinances.
Yeah, if you choose to take out the language about resolutions and other council action, again, I have no opinion about this, so it's just a policy decision for you to make, then that will lessen the power of the mayor, whoever the mayor is at that time, to veto action of the council.
And is that the way it's currently written, just ordinances?
It is currently written just as ordinances, yes.
So we have been in violation of our charter in the past when that's happened.
I don't think we've had anything other than ordinances vetoed, have we?
If the answer to that is no, then why are we even changing it?
Well, the question has come up before, and the course of action has been changed. It can be changed in whether or not you present something as an ordinance or a resolution. For example, if we write up action to be taken by the council, be it hereby ordained that we hire the Velcro Pygmies to come play on August the 19th, then it has become an ordinance, even though that it is of a temporary nature, and, there can be squabbles,
That's a gray
Yes,
area.
my question was, more in the past, not in the future. If mayors in the past vetoed actions that were not ordinances, how did that happen per our charter?
I don't know that it has happened. I don't know that any mayors have vetoed resolutions, but it has come into play as to whether or not something was styled as an ordinance or a resolution. I mean, the biggest problem got resolved with the issue that any type of budget change has to be through ordinance. That was where the biggest fights were, as, do I have the power to veto a budget item? And before we clearly defined that every budget change has to be through ordinance, that was where the fights generally were.
So then, if you haven't, what I heard you say then, we haven't diminished the power of the mayor if we leave it the way it is,
Well, he has to rewrite
as it's
this.
been done in the past.
You haven't diminished it from there,
Right.
but this attempts to enhance it, to broaden it.
It does broaden it, but it does also take away, just the question that's hanging out there.
Well, if we took out the resolution or other council measure, took that out of this, it's back to making it very simple. It's an ordinance. And, they can play around with those ordinances. You can't get around that.
If it's the will of a unanimity of the council to take that language out, then it can be done. And what our goal here is to come up with some language that all 6 of you can live with and support.
Yeah, whatever we decide the council's after us should have no problem with it. They probably will, but if we can live with it, surely they can.
Well, if they do, they have the same
Change it.
ability to change it that
That's
you do
right.
to change it now.
What do
I
you,
like the idea, if we vote on it, the mayor can veto it. It takes everything out of perspective. It's just a fact. Now, there are times when we are asked our opinion, and that would not be considered a vote, but I don't know of any time we've been asked our opinion on something that's been important, whether it's a resolution or ordinances, that we didn't vote on it. So, is this better?
yeah. I don't really remember on my previous terms that the mayor's ever vetoed anything other than an ordinance. You should have better memory than us. Do you remember any vetoes of resolutions or?
Yes, way back, we had a mayor that would do that. But that was a long time ago.
How'd that work out?
Well, it was, sometimes it's hard to get in touch with him being in China.
I know who that is.
So probably wouldn't want that happening too much.
Oh, I agree. I agree totally.
But we have the option, if we don't like the veto, of having a call meeting immediately and reversing it. If the council, 4 members of the council think that strongly it should be reversed.
But that's always been in here. I think what we're talking about is whether or not ordinances and resolutions and things of that nature can be vetoed.
Yeah, the way it's written now, everything can be vetoed.
There are a whole bunch of different ways it can be done. Also, many cities have the mayor being able to vote. In this, I mean, here in Villa Rica, the mayor does not vote unless it's to break a tie. So he or she does not have the power to actually vote unless there is a tie. But conversely, the power of veto is a strong power. It's sort
What
of
is the will of the council, so we can move along on this? I'll just, let me speak on behalf of the mayor, this mayor anyway. To me, you know, and I've stated this publicly, you know, veto is somewhat of a failure on my part. I'll take it on me, because if I can't get a consensus of opinion from this council, and we're constantly at loggerheads and I'm having to veto all the actions, then there is a problem, as was stated earlier. So I don't intend to use the veto as a hammer. At the same time, I would just, you know, ask that you be respectful to the office of mayor, and that you not, you know, I'm already limited, or the mayor's position is already limited in what authority we do have in the city. So that's just my input. But however y'all vote certainly is the will of the council.
I think I would go along with Berlin. I have no problem with you vetoing anything we pass, because we can always override it. We have the option of overriding it.
I can't hear Danny.
I said, I'll go along with you. Can you hear me now, Leslie? Hello, Leslie.
Can you hear him now?
Yeah, it's breaking up. I couldn't hear what Danny said when he was going along with Berlin.
Yeah, I want me and the mayor having the option of vetoing anything we pass. We can always override it.
Anything we pass?
Yeah, if we pass something, he has an option of vetoing it or not, but he says, this mayor says he's not going to exercise that option.
I wouldn't say I have super strong feelings one way or the other on this, other than I feel real strongly about preserving the veto power of the mayor for all ordinances and budget line item in the budget. I think the fact that he has a line item veto is a good thing, because the mayor doesn't get to vote, so that's the only power in the sense that that elected official has, is the veto power or to vote when there's a tie. If it were something of a temporary nature with a resolution, and the example that you gave, David, of, hey, we'd like to have this banned or whatever, the time that I see that it could be a problem if you had a mayor that could veto everything would be when you have just a really bad relationship between the council and mayor, and you have a mayor that wants to badger the council and veto everything. Now, that could happen in the future. It's not what we have now. So I'm open to the fact that we could pass resolutions that would not be vetoable, but I'm very adamant about retaining the veto power, line item budget, and on all ordinances.
I think something that we don't want to forget here too is that if it's subject to a veto, it also has that 3-day window. And there's got to be things that we don't want to have that just hanging out there, which leads me to believe that it makes more sense to leave it at ordinances like it's already written. I don't think that diminishes the power of the mayor at all. It just, it clears up this uncertainty about any other actions by the council and doesn't have us waiting 3 days on everything that happens up here.
I guess we had to think about the future. We won't always have this mayor, so that can happen.
So what is your direction to council, staff? Council? What is your direction to our city attorney, council?
I don't think we're making anything permanent.
No, we're not, but I
would
think-
still feel better with what I just stated, but I don't
I
I
got
doubt
the-
we'll be taking any votes.
You want to take out the resolution or other council measures that appears all through here.
Right,
And that leaves it with just ordinances.
right, which is the biggest thing we do. Certainly the most significant.
Most important.
Again, all the points you're making are very, very valid. There are two other examples, because again, and it's hard to predict everything that could happen. If the council passes a resolution of thanks to the Boy Scouts for doing something, do you really want to have the mayor to be able to veto that?
That'd make us look really bad.
It would.
But you want to have to wait 3 days to do it.
But by the same token, if you pass a resolution to do away with the senior exemption or the senior rates for water and sewer authority, which is a more substantive type of action, but is probably not an ordinance, do you want the mayor to be able to veto action of that nature?
Could it then be put into an ordinance formation and be voted on at the next meeting? I mean, we could change it back with declaring it an ordinance, be able to override an ordinance, veto.
There's
There's ways around
There's
it,
a world of
obviously.
possibilities here, and I can't come up with an answer for every gotcha question that can come up. I mean, because I can make them up myself that are unanswerable. Y'all just got to use your best judgment as to what you think will work the best, that will gain a unanimous acceptance, and is going to be approved by our state legislative delegation, because even if we come up with a unanimously approved proposed charter, if the state legislative delegation chooses not to introduce it, it doesn't get introduced.
So is it fair to say that we can discuss this further so we can move along to another
Yeah.
item?
I think so.
All right. Councilman Carter, since you started out, do you have anything else that you wanted to?
I'll yield the floor to someone else because I left my notes at home.
Councilman McDougal, McPherson, or Councilman Best?
We just got me reset, so I'm still bringing mine up.
Councilman Best?
Trying to find it.
Councilman McPherson?
Ready to move on.
Do you-
You have one you want to talk about?
What about dismissal of city manager? Are we going in any sort of order?
Yeah, that's on page 12, and that's a good one to bring up, and because it's a very clear issue that needs to be decided by you all to decide which of the two alternatives you want to maintain. On page 12, alternative 1 follows along with what our current practice has been with our last 4 to 5 city managers. We have entered into a contract with each and every one of them, and we've really gone by the terms of the contract. However, our current charter does have the language that's contained in Alternative 2, which often was in conflict with the contract that we had entered into with our city manager. And I think it's clear that you need to make a choice of either to rely on your contractual obligations to the city manager or acknowledge that we're going with this statutory basis to remove them in Alternative 2.
Okay. I like alternative 1 because it's very simple and clean. That's the one I would vote for.
Which is what we have now. Correct, David?
Well,
As it
that's what
works.
we've been acting on.
It's been
whether-
reworded.
That's not what's in the charter right now.
I like the way he rewrote it. I like
Did you say alternative number 2?
no 1.
1.
1 is clean. He struck out a lot of things on it and left and changed the main section of it. Simple and straightforward.
I guess I'll make a comment here. The only problem I've got with alternate 1 is that you've basically given each new council, elected group of officials here, the chance to make different contracts with different city managers. And the charter would be the consistent way to go in that regard. If the charter states this is what the limitations of the council is as far as termination of a city manager, then that's going to go for council to council and mayor to mayor until they change it. So if we keep it like alternate one is, then basically every council that came in could have a different opinion as to what was malfeasance of office, or, well, that's pretty cut and dry, but that's the only point I'll make. The reason I like alternate two is because it is stated for the public to know that's what the rule is, that's what the law is as far as that termination process.
I would say that alternate two is pretty cumbersome.
It is very
It
cumbersome.
seems like that would be a real
It would drag out
difficult
forever.
process, and then you're talking about a majority of the council passing a resolution that states the reason for removal, and where, alternate one is clean. We create a contract by negotiation, which is what we did with this guy, and to me, things change, and we wouldn't want to be held to the specifics of this charter while we're negotiating a contract. So I do like alternate one better.
Did I understand Jeff to say that it would leave it to the mayor and council to interpret what is malfeasance? Because that is struck out.
No. That's not what I said, but the crux to my argument, and it's not really an argument, but the difference in alternate one and alternate two, to me, is alternate one is contract driven, alternate two is driven by the charter. Is that correct, David?
Yes, that's clearly correct.
Okay.
An alternate two would take forever to remove a city manager, and that's one thing we don't need. We had a long, drawn-out process, and I have had it since I've been on the council, and that kind of throws your council into turmoil. And that's one thing we don't need on this council.
The problem, or not, one of the issues with the existing language is it virtually forces you to be in litigation with your city manager.
Yeah.
And that's not a good,
And it's drug out.
it's not good, hasn't proven to be good in the past, for the city manager nor for the city.
Are you talking about alternate one didn't work in the past?
No,
Alternate two?
alternate two, which is the language that's in our charter right now.
Oh, okay.
Public
Yeah,
hearings
I agree
and all
with
that
that.
stuff.
I agree with that.
And where if we create a contract, we talk about all the terms of that contract and the specifics of it in hiring that particular individual, and that's why that makes more sense to me than to have these arbitrary guidelines in this charter.
And the hard reality of life is that when an election takes place and the council changes over, I think all city managers would recognize that's a day of reckoning when things are going to could change. Hopefully they don't, but they could. And that new council, as it then is constituted, supposedly expressing the will of the people of the city. If they choose to make a change, they need to make a change. We have tried to build into all of our contracts some protection for our city managers, and that the council shouldn't make a change lightheartedly, because there are consequences built into the contract, which serves as the protection to the city manager, that if you just choose to make a change for the sake of change, you're going to pay a price for that. But you still should preserve that right to make a change just because the politics have changed, without having to go to the trouble of trying to prove that the city manager has done something wrong when they may not have done anything wrong other than just not be the person that the majority wants then.
Maybe the council just wants to go in a different direction, and they should have that right.
Yeah, it shouldn't
if they're
be,
willing to pay the price.
shouldn't be a several months worth of time
That's spelled out
involved.
in the contract.
You realize how it'd grind us to a halt if we had to go through all that?
I think alternate 2 is a mess.
It is.
I could only go with alternate 1.
Me too.
I like the definite wording of alternate 2, but I do not like the idea of 85 days to get rid of city manager. It's not fair to him or her.
Or the city.
It's not fair to the city and the people in it. 1 would be better, but I think some more language may need to be added to that in some way to protect both the city and the city manager.
Will you do that with the contract?
Well, what kind
Hey, that's what I'm saying, exactly,
oh, you mean in the contract or
Yes.
in the charter? Okay.
in the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna be, the contracts are gonna be different for everybody, I think. There'll be some things here, some things there. Some people want this and some other want that. So I think that's gonna be up to the city managers itself. But I think the number 1 would be a way that I'd like to go.
Councilman McPherson, do you have any other things you want to bring up?
There wasn't, I'm sorry, Leslie, there was another policy decision in here. Where was it, David?
Let me find it.
Are you still there, Councilman McPherson?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Right off the top of my head, I don't know. I might have had a few more, but I didn't know till yesterday that we had a charter meeting today, so I wasn't as prepared with questions, even though I have it tabbed from months ago.
I remember seeing 2 questions about policy in there.
I think on page 11, section 3.11, it is a policy issue in that is a definite statement of how the council deals with employees.
Oh, yeah.
That provision is not in our existing charter.
I read through that and I liked it because we really shouldn't be getting into the details of the city and directing the employees. That causes confusion amongst the employees. If the 6 of us are giving directions around the city manager, it could be some really messy situations develop.
You know, I try to look at this with a devil's advocate mentality, and when you read this, it seems pretty mundane, and it seems like the way we should operate and the way we probably do operate. But if you go a little further in this charter, you find out that if you violate anything in this charter, you can be removed from office, which specifically means that if any of us were to give a directive to an employee not going through the city manager, you violated this charter and you could be removed from office.
That's
I'd like
true.
you to weigh in on that for just a minute if you would.
No, I think that's true, that if you did it, you've answered your own question,
Well,
which
I
is
just wanted to
yes.
hear you say it because this is a pitfall that anybody could walk into fairly easily, and any employee who knows about it, any member of the public, any other elected official that found out about it could call upon that process to begin. I think it's very risky to leave this language in here unless you're very certain that this is not going to happen.
Okay, on page 18, that's another policy decision. That's very much like what you're talking about here. It says removal of officers. Who is an officer? I mean, who is spelled out as an officer?
Mayor, the council,
Doesn't really detail that.
the clerk, the attorney. Those are the officers of the city.
I think if we're going to put something like that in, we have to define who the officers are. Because I really didn't understand who all was included.
it says and employees when you're looking at 3.11. City officers and employees.
You're back to 3. I was over on.
I understand, but you were pointing out that they're related.
The
I would like us to answer the question of whether or not we're going to leave 3.11 in, or if we're going to modify it. This is easy for me. I don't do it. But I'm telling you, it's a pitfall for some people, either now or in the future. I can leave it or not, but I think we should consider these things when we're redoing this charter.
Well,
I would just, I would echo those thoughts and say that, you know, if you had a situation, and we don't have that situation now, we have a very good city manager, but you could have a situation, if this were in the charter written, and that city manager felt like he was being attacked by the elected officials here, that if one of those council persons or the mayor gave a directive to an employee, according to our charter, as Councilman McDougal has said, that council person could be removed from office. That's a real life situation.
And it'd be very difficult to avoid that. I mean, I take this charter very seriously. I keep a copy of it. It's almost like the Constitution. I have a copy of that. When you read through this, it's your guideline for how to operate. And if we don't hold ourselves to that, what are we doing here? So to me, it's very important. We just need to know what we're agreeing to here. And it's for future councils too, so I would think you all would want to weigh in on this. I can leave it or not. It's easy for me.
It's an important provision because I understand the point that you could be removed from office for inadvertently violating it, but if you take it out, then you're leaving the door open for people to willfully and intentionally violate it at will. And that is a huge concern from the city's perspective. If each and every one of you have the power to call up department heads and say, I don't care what Tom or the city manager said, this is what I want you to do, you've got chaos and catastrophe. And an inoperable, dysfunctional city at that point. So you need to make some type of statement in this charter that employment matters are in the control of the city manager, and that
When I
generally
first read
speak-
it, my question was, where are the consequences?
Well, and that's a good question.
Now I know where the consequences are.
The consequences that are set forth there in section 5.30, let me just address that for a moment.
What page is that on?
It's on page 18.
Okay.
that's where I was quoting from.
The changes that were made in that section were to attempt to mirror existing state law. And I should send that to you, or I brought it, and I didn't bring that to tell you what the state law procedures are for removal of a public official. But what I attempted to do was just to mirror the state law to say that we would remove elected officials in Villa Rica if necessary based on existing state law, rather than trying to create, some special rules. If you see what we had in there, to remove an official, we had to prove that they were incompetent or committed misfeasance or malfeasance in office as a ground. How difficult is it for us within the context of the council trying to decide whether one of you is incompetent or not? I mean, I submit to you that it couldn't be done. You can't you can't very easily sit in judgment of each other on issues like that.
I assure you it will be tried.
Well, of course, it is tried anyway, every day.
I'm not, like I said, I can go either way, but it may be that we could have some additional language in there. I mean, there are places where we say that acting in the best judgment, or maybe if it's a of a temporary nature. I don't know. It's something to consider, though, and maybe we don't decide it today.
Let me just throw this out there. If we change that language to say that we should refrain from giving directions to employees, that doesn't. I'm just throwing that out there. What do y'all think?
You think that would do anything? What do you think, David?
I think it's making a statement, which I heard somebody make earlier, but it doesn't have any teeth.
I think it's just a little bit of ink on a paper. Maybe we could talk about it, or think about this a little more, and then talk about it when we meet again, rather than getting hung up on this.
Okay.
Anytime I think we are attempting to impose rules on ourselves, rules on an elected body, it's going to be tense, and we ought to give it more thought than that. Simply making any statement in here without teeth doesn't much matter either, I think. It'd be hard for me to see why that matters.
Okay, the only thing I would ask you to do is put something in here identifying who the officers are. Add that in somewhere.
Okay.
Well,
And one other thing I am going to do is I will send you what the meaning of that Section 5.30, removal of officers, what that provision means under state law. It is, I mean, the intent of it was to prevent the council from having wars amongst each other, which has been a problem. It hadn't really ever been a problem here, but in other cities, that has been a big problem. If one councilman says, I think you violated the charter, I move that you be removed from office, and suddenly call the question, and 3 people throw up their hand and say, another councilman has been removed from office because we believe that they have violated the charter. We don't need that type of provision because it just turns everything into politics amongst you, and you shouldn't be subject to getting kicked out of office just because any given moment 3 other people on the council are mad at you about
Different
something.
policy position.
Now, I agree with the part,
The state
Steps
law
of removal.
provisions require that it has to be something much more serious than that. To be removed from office, you either got to be recalled, which is you've got the whole public mad at you. You've got to have had an action filed against you in Superior Court, which, is a pretty serious thing if somebody is willing to go to that length to say that you violated the charter. That's not something that's going to happen on the spur of the moment. And then the third one is by any other method permitted by state law. Well, there's really not any other method permitted.
but the state law may change.
It could.
I agree with taking a lot of this stuff out on Section B and shortening it.
Councilman McPherson, do you have anything else?
I've been jumping between page 11 and page 18, and would just say, on page 11 where it says not giving orders to an employee and that sort of thing, I like having some of that language in there. And I didn't catch everything that David said, except that I want to make sure, yes, if somebody inadvertently, didn't realize they gave some sort of directive, you wouldn't want to treat that the same. So I just want to make sure, we protect somebody in that case. But I like the language otherwise that, we are not to give orders or directives to employees. That's what the city manager is for. And then on 18, I'm totally with the idea that we can't vote one another off, and deferring to state law, I believe it is, for removal of office. I'm good.
Okay.
That's nicely worded.
Councilman McDougal, have you you want to?
Well, so let's go back to page 8, and this is just a housekeeping item. On 2.21, section B, says that special meetings of the council may be held on call of the mayor with the consent of at least 2 members of the council and upon the call of 3 council members.
Or.
It probably should say or, but, and David.
Yeah,
if it-
I agree. That's what
okay,
it
that's
was.
not
That's
where
the
I'm going,
intent.
though. And then it also says that they would be served by email personally. I like that, and at least 24 hours in advance. I might like that to say 48 hours. How much time are we required to give the public?
24, I think.
24 hours.
24? Okay. Well, then I guess that'll be fine, because it could be as low as 24 hours. The second piece, though, so that's how you call a special meeting. So then look at quorum. The mayor or mayor pro tem when presiding and 3 councilmen shall constitute a quorum and shall be authorized to transact business. It just seems inconsistent to me that you can call a meeting with less signatures, with fewer signatures than are required to actually function in a meeting.
Should that read or instead of and?
Yeah, he just pointed that out. That and should be an or.
It's about right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, 2 members of the council is not a quorum anyway. It takes 3 voting members of the council to be a quorum. And then 2 of those, if 2 of them voted on a subject, it would pass.
I mean, the quorum provides that you have to have 4 people here to have a real meeting.
The quorum it used to be 3. When did it go to 4?
Said people.
Oh, people.
4 people.
Okay.
You got to have either the mayor and 3 council people, or the mayor pro tem and 3 council people to have an official
So
meeting.
my question is the inconsistency between who can call a meeting and how many people are actually there. The second thing is that when you read this about the quorum, we always operate as 3 of us can't be together.
Yeah, that's a quorum.
But clearly what this says is that the mayor or the mayor pro tem would also have to be in attendance for that to be a quorum. So can 3 of us talk together and not
what-
constitute a quorum?
Is this the way it was originally?
We've always acted as you should not, and I'm going to stick with that. I go
So
back
should we
and
make a
look
change
at that in conjunction with this, but if 3 of you are getting together, I mean, because again, many times you're also serving as committee members, which is much less, I'll look at that question.
I think we should probably clarify it if that's
Right.
how we're going to operate.
Now, the mayor pro
What about the
tem,
inconsistent question? I'm sorry. Danny,
The difference on why you have lesser people to call a meeting is that, and that's just a policy decision as to whether or not you really want to have an entire quorum call a meeting. That would be different from most every other city. If you've got 2
Future.
people that really want to have a meeting, or 3 people that really want to have a meeting, they probably ought to have the right to try and call one.
well, 3 council members can. It always has been that way. But also the quorum, if you have a mayor pro tem there, he's a voting member. Why would you need other than 2 more? Because you got 3 voting members there. And it says that if you have 3 voting members, 2 could make a decision.
Well, that becomes a question of, the mayor pro tem is just a council person. He has the power of a council person. When he's presiding in a meeting, the mayor pro tem has the right, in the absence of the mayor, to conduct meetings, but the mayor pro tem does not get additional powers as a result of sitting in for the mayor. I mean, we've been through this before. The mayor pro tem does not have the right to veto
Right.
ordinances, to exercise. I mean, they really don't have any additional power above and beyond, their station as a council person.
But he can vote. So if you have the mayor pro tem,
can vote. He or she can vote.
so if you have the mayor pro tem and 2 people, don't you have a quorum? I mean, all 3 people can vote.
Yes.
I think that's really the question you're going to look at, right?
Right.
I mean,
It
those
is.
questions go together.
I'll see if I can make that more
I guess
clear.
going back to, again, devil's advocate, you could have 3 rogue council members constantly calling meetings, which you all have to be served on, and, you know, and then we show up here, no mayor shows up, no mayor pro tem shows up, because they didn't agree to the meeting. I don't really see that happening. We don't have it happen here, but again, we're creating a document that people are going to live by in the future.
Well, actually, we almost had it happen tonight.
So we haven't seen it, but we could.
We had 3 people, council people, ask for a meeting tonight, and Councilman Marchman was late, couldn't be here, and had Councilman McPherson not called in to teleconference, we would not have met this rule.
I think I would like to see, you know, subject to the legal position here, that the calling of these meetings be at least a quorum. And I'm not sure if you're going to make a change to this quorum, because it seems inconsistent to me, but I would say take a look at that,
Okay.
and we can move on from there. And as far as I remember, I didn't have anything else.
Okay. Councilman Best? You're on deck, Councilman Marchman. So
Page 13.
you're on deck, so.
Page 13, 331.
Tax collector.
I guess that's one we missed. Is there any reason that should stay in there, David?
Say it again.
Is there any,
Page 13.
331.
331.
3.31.
The reason for keeping that provision in there is because there is a provision in the state law that provides that if you are going to levy on past due taxes, the person defined in the state ordinance to do that is called the tax collector for the municipality. I don't know that there's anything magic about calling them a tax collector. I think perhaps you could rename it as something else, but there has to be a person on behalf of the city who has the ability to issue FIFAs for unpaid taxes.
And not necessarily an employee.
Right.
So who is our tax collector?
Is the tax commissioner for the 2 counties, I would assume.
For Carroll County?
So do we have to designate them officially?
We do. I think the state law would say that we have the power to do it ourselves. Our existing city charter says that we have the power to do it ourselves. We have contracted in the past with the state, with the county tax commissioner to handle that for us.
Do those agreements designate them as the tax collector?
I believe it is. I believe that it does. I mean, that's been in place for so long, I don't know that we've even got a current contract with them.
Well, I think the rate has changed or something even since I've been here. So did that come to you?
You talking about the rate that the tax commissioner in each county, in our case?
One of them. I'm not sure both of them changed.
They come to us, though.
They
do
have
come to
come
us.
to you to approve that rate. And I
Rings a bell.
Because isn't it true that we don't pay the county, we pay them personally?
you do.
So it's not like it's in there, it goes to the general fund of the county, it goes to the general fund of the person in charge of the
The tax commissioner.
tax commissioner. It goes in their checking account. Now, some people say it's not a great amount of money, but it seems like it's maybe $5 per tax bill.
I'll take a look at that as to whether or not that's a provision that could just simply be removed. I don't think that it is that critical that we have to have it in the charter.
Okay.
Is it-
Anything else?
I think it's just one we missed way back when we took out the gas board and back in 1927 or something.
Right.
Anything else, Councilman Best?
I think we may have missed one. All right, page 11, 311B. As many boards and whatever we have, and I don't know this totally is that we do or do not do, but I think it's something we need to be looking at more severely, especially if the boards that we have in the city now, and as many people that are voting on those boards, if this is going to be a decision, fine. If it's not, we'll deal with it.
Is this the way the charter is now? Because actually I'm in violation of that part of the charter. Because I'm a voting member of the Industrial Development Authority.
Well, this is intended to bring this in line with state law, because state law does specifically say that you can have one member of the governing authority to be on the development authority. We have a state law that says that all of you can be on the public facilities authority. The existing charter was not in line with state law, so we needed to make a change to bring us into compliance with what state law allows you to do.
So you say as may be specifically allowed by city ordinance or state law, so we're going to have to pass an ordinance if we include this in the charter?
No, state law allows one member to be on the development authority.
Okay.
That's you. So
Okay.
state law already allows you to do that. This is just trying to bring
Just make clarify.
our charter into compliance with state law.
All right.
Anything else?
Yes.
Wait, Council,
I have to
wait a minute.
discuss that
Council,
one right now, but David, if you wouldn't mind taking another look at page 6 before the next meeting, section 2.11, qualifications for office. Since this kind of came up recently, if we can be more specific about the qualification, or if it's all going to come down to how state law is written. So if you just wouldn't mind maybe taking a look at that before we have another meeting.
Okay, I will do that.
Councilman Best, anything else?
Yeah, on page 11 again. Number E. The word cause, is that a definition that we can come up with in a written?
Probably should. It is not currently defined.
Member of a board.
I mean, you know, the mayor likes Georgia, so is that a cause?
No.
I mean, that's what I'm asking, though. It's,
Well, that's a good point, and it's something that we should give some consideration to, is to
Whole section E.
how you're going to define what reasons you could remove somebody from a board, commission, or authority.
Good luck on that one.
yeah.
Well, and there's a wide range of stuff. I mean, you see a lot of rules that say, you know, if you've missed 2 meetings in a row or 3 meetings in a row without excuse, then that's a reason, that's cause.
Well, could we say something like the way we do the city manager? These are at will, and if 3 members of the city council vote to remove you, then you're out. And cause is up to each of us. We may decide what is or is not cause. And just to piggyback on an earlier discussion, I wouldn't want that to be able to be vetoed either.
It may be removed from office. Now, are we talking about taking off council or just taking off the authority?
We're talking about boards.
On the board, commission, or authority.
Any member of a board, commission, or authority may be removed from office.
We want to make it more consistent with at will.
It seems to me if we left for cause in there, then you have to get into defining what is for cause and something that falls outside that line, those guidelines. If there's 3 council members that feel somebody needs to come off, I mean, it could be for something that they're argumentative all the time, you know, maybe with other people on the board, or they don't do their homework on the board. And if we put for cause, we have to have all that written out somewhere.
They missed too many meetings, or they were particularly rude to a member of the public.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an example. What if they're disrespectful when people come before them to speak? I mean, I can't imagine that we'd have to have all those written out in a definition for cause.
I don't even like the way it's written, remove
You started it.
removed from office. That almost sounds like you can be taken off the council. I mean, that
Not off the council.
doesn't sound clear.
I mean, again, this is limited to boards, commissions, or authorities.
Okay. It's part of 3.12.
Councilman Best, you
I still, my issue is, if we put it in writing, nobody can complain. But if it's not in writing, and we have an issue come up with any board or whatever, that they are removed from office for cause, they don't know what cause is.
Yeah, and I've taken from the comments here that I either need to come up with a good definition of cause that y'all would accept, or else to change it to an at-will removal, that you go into office on a board, commission, or authority knowing that you can be removed for any reason at any time. You know, maybe that cuts down on the willingness of people to serve on your boards, commissions, and authorities, but maybe it doesn't.
I like
It
that,
would
Will.
if people saw it being abused, it might.
Yeah,
But I think if they didn't, that would never come up.
I like the at will addition, but that's my opinion. Anything else,
I'd like
Councilman?
to take the for cause out of it.
Councilman Best?
It's good.
Councilman Marshman?
I'm good.
No, not really. I was just listening to what everybody was saying. And, I was glad that they brought up that about the election. Got that. Excuse me. I was glad that you all talked about that, about the qualifying for members of the council, because that would seem like to be a sore point in some people's minds and eyes. So if that could be clarified, so we won't have to be guessing and wiggling and waggling with that, I think that would be a good thing. But I think you all have hit the points that I was considering or was concerned with, as far as what I've been here and heard. Most of those have been touched on, so I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now it's my turn. The things that, I'm going to mention some of the things that were mentioned by Mr. Chance, who brought some things up, and I just want to read those into the record. And one of those is that the cause thing was one of the things that he had also alluded to, but there are references throughout here that say mayor and council, and then there are other references that just say council. Is it understood that if it says council, that includes the mayor?
Probably, but I think that's a good suggestion, and I think that we need to go back and make it consistent throughout. I mean, I take all those as being good suggestions to make it consistent, so I would probably reword everything to say mayor and council.
Okay. And section 3.32 regarding the city attorney, the way it's written out says that the city attorney has to be an independent contractor. And that's not a problem now at all. But does the council see a time when we may hire a city attorney in-house where that would not be the case?
That was a good suggestion also, and that's something I think we just didn't consider because it just was following the existing language. But yeah, we do need to provide for some flexibility for the city to do what it needs to do at any given point in time to be efficient and economical.
Right, without having to go back and change the charter to be able
Right.
to do
Right.
it. That flexibility is needed.
And then the last point, and I think it's a very important one, is that there are, most of the time it states in here that his or her, but there are other parts in here that say his specifically or her. So just, that's more of a housekeeping thing, but, if there's a reference that says his specifically or her specifically, then that needs to either state his or her or their, in my opinion.
Correct. I agree with that also, and that's just a function that proves this process of getting everybody to look at it is working, because that's a good suggestion that we just missed the first time around.
Does any other council person have anything else they want to add?
I do.
Okay.
I want to go back and look at 2.25.
What page?
I got to find it myself. Page 9. So I had a question about whether or not emergency ordinances could be vetoed.
I think the answer to that question now is yes.
And does that make good sense? It may be a little bit easier now that we're talking about reducing it from 10 days to 3 days, but it is still something to think about. So an emergency ordinance would be passed, and then it couldn't be used, it couldn't go into effect until 3 days had passed.
Unless the mayor went in and signed it the next day.
That's not really true. If he vetoes it, within 24 hours, we can call a meeting, right? If he turns in a veto.
Would you go back to the mayor's comment that unless he goes in and signs it the next day? Does that make it effective immediately and the time is waived? And I would think in most cases, if it's an emergency ordinance, that you would think the mayor would agree with it and we wouldn't be in the position of having to worry about a veto, but I've never seen an emergency ordinance.
So the answer to that was if the mayor goes in the next day and signs that, then it becomes effective immediately.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of why that language is even in there. That's been in the charter forever. I think it probably harkens back to a time when it was much more difficult to get everybody together, where you couldn't just email everybody saying you need to get up to the meeting tomorrow or the next day. I think it was back when you had to really work to get a group of folks together to deal with an emergency.
Well, so would it be appropriate to remove this language?
Yeah.
Get rid of it?
I was going to suggest.
Yeah, I'm
give
going
some
to take a
thought
look
to
at that. That may be a very valid point to just take it out altogether, because anything that is truly an emergency, we can deal with under our normal operating procedures. If
We could call a special meeting on just like that now.
you're right, if you need to
Participate by phone.
right, if you need to do something, you can generally do it within you can have council action within 24 hours in a true emergency.
I would say let's consider striking that.
Are you talking about the whole paragraph?
Yes, ma'am.
The whole section.
2.25, emergency ordinance.
225? Okay. Because I was just thinking about what the mayor was saying about the he and she, and then down there on that bottom line, it says at least 3 councilmen, and you got 2 females sitting here.
Yeah.
So shouldn't we be saying council member?
I'm going to fix every one of those. So you,
Oh, not talking about just in there. But I'm
next
talking
draft, you won't see any,
it's
you won't
still
see any
saying
councilmen.
Councilman Marchville, Councilman McPherson, and we not men, a man, and so.
As
that's
best
the
I can,
biggest
I'm going to make
reason.
all of you council persons.
Yeah, that,
Council member.
council member, council person.
We just talked about a second ago about the mayor pro tem, and 3 council people. So what's the difference of that and this?
Just saying 3 men.
She don't like the meaning.
I mean, if they're, but the affirmative vote of at least 3 council men shall be required for adoption. So now, a while ago, and I can't remember exactly where it's at, we talked about mayor or mayor pro tem and 3 council.
Right. And maybe this was intended to give, for an emergency ordinance, a smaller number of people could take action in an
Okay.
emergency. I mean, that may have been the intent. It's never been used that I know of. It may not be necessary anymore. Back when when the city was only having 1 meeting a month, and it was so difficult to call a special meeting that
Yeah.
maybe you needed something to deal with emergencies. But I think just our normal operating procedure now, we can deal with emergencies just without having a special process for it.
The only thing I would say is if that might be worth thinking about if there was some provision for a smaller number of council to be able to pass some sort of an ordinance that would be lawful within the charter. I don't know, some kind of a major catastrophe. I think it'd be a serious emergency. But then you wouldn't need that quorum. That may have been what the language was about, but I would just ask you to take a look at it.
Okay.
My initial instinct is that it be stricken. So, and the last one I've got here is 3.22. And what I would say here is the chief administrative officer, which is the city manager, would have the power to appoint and remove. This language only gives him the power to appoint. I think we should consider also the power to remove all city officers and department directors with the approval of the council.
There are some cases that say that the power to appoint inherently comes with the power to remove, but I like the suggestion to make it clear and stick it in there.
And I would suggest that when you use the word manager, you put city in front of it, because I'm seeing it both ways. I'm seeing city manager some places and manager in other places.
Okay.
Good point.
And I would just say that to the point you just made, one of the things we talked about last year was the language in here about the city manager being able to appoint city attorney. And there was also some language about being able to remove him. We went ahead and clarified that, so I think clarification here is warranted.
Right.
Still leaves it up to the council. It would still need to come to the council.
Yes, it is, as authorized by the council.
And that's it. That's all I've got.
Anybody else?
David, do you remember in a charter who is able to declare an emergency?
I want to say that that is a matter of state law rather than the charter, and I believe it's the mayor.
That's not in here anywhere.
I've tried looking fairly quick, I didn't see it.
It would be under the specific powers of the mayor if it's in here. And I don't recall that being in here. If that's something that you believe is an important thing to put in, then that's a good suggestion.
The mayor of the city of Newnan declared a state of emergency yesterday.
I'll take a look at that.
Trying to remember back, we had a hurricane, tornado, big storm come through, and everybody got the council and carried them down to the bottom of the jail, thinking it was going to tear the place down. I don't know if they ever declared an emergency then, but it just dawned on me, who declares it? Does the city manager? Does the council? Does the mayor? And let's just say the mayor's not in town.
Then it would be the mayor pro tem.
Asking the question.
Well, the council clearly has, I mean, the council taking normal action clearly has the power to declare an emergency. I guess the question you're asking is, does any one individual have the power to declare an emergency, and to what extent do they have the power to declare?
Right.
Does the mayor of the city have the right to just show up one day and saying, I'm declaring an emergency? Like
could sound
like
an
you said, that I'm imposing a personal curfew on everybody. I would argue that the mayor does not have that power, nor should you give any one person that type of power. Now, if the mayor and council want to get together and vote to declare an emergency, maybe that's something to be considered. But if you have a hurricane coming through or a tornado and everything is destroyed, chances are somebody's just going to assume control at that point, whether it be the mayor, the police chief, the emergency director for the county. Somebody's going to take control.
The tornado gonna take control.
But I mean, is it spelled out? You said something about state law earlier. Is it spelled out in?
I'm going to check that point to see if there is a provision in there that maybe answers that question as to who formally has authority.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I want to, if I could, just out of respect, sometimes we get emails and other communications from our constituents, and I think it's fair to at least ask David to talk a little bit about how we ended up with the election schedule that we have, where we have half of this body being elected, and then 2 years later the other half being elected.
Yeah.
And there has been a suggestion that we change those to 2 and 2 and 1. I wouldn't really see how you could do that, but 2, 2, and 2, because that third time you'd have to elect a mayor, because the mayor's left out of that schedule. But would you just talk about how we have this schedule?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that back up, because certainly a legitimate question, a legitimate point. The problem with that suggestion, however, is just the practicality of it. You've got 4-year terms, and state law does say that municipal elections can only be held in odd-numbered years. So, if you're talking about doing 2, 2, and 1, then that's putting somebody, serving 6 years, which is you can't do. So if you have two council elected in 2017 and 2, elected in 2019, then when is that odd person going to come up? I mean, it's really going to have to either be in 2017 or 2019.
Since we're limited to 4 years each, you're right.
As long as you've got 4-year terms.
Yeah.
So that's why you got 3 council members, then 2 council members and the mayor. So you got it all. Since you got 6, that would seem like the logical thing to do rather than 2, 2, and 1.
Yeah, I took it as being a good suggestion, but the math doesn't work out right.
Yeah.
Especially with the state
Okay,
law.
that makes sense.
State law determines it, really.
And then the other suggestion that is in here is a discussion on term limits. And I don't think we've ever had a discussion about term limits, and I don't have a real solid position on that, but has that ever been discussed by this body?
No. I mean, it has not. I mean, it has come up as a suggestion on several occasions in the course of discussion of a new charter, but to my knowledge, there had never really been a discussion of it, so it's ripe for discussion. If a unanimous group of you have an opinion on that issue, then we have an opportunity to address it. There's nothing in state law that prohibits the city from adopting for itself term limits, but there's nothing that mandates it either. I mean, you're familiar with what the policy arguments are, that by not having term limits, you build in, continuity and knowledge, and stability. By having term limits, you ensure some turnover and new ideas, and people don't grow stale in place.
I don't have a solid position either way. I just wanted to at least offer that out there for discussion today, or maybe we can take it up the next time we have a meeting, if nobody has an opinion today.
This is a question that hasn't, I don't think it's ever come up here, but if we were to impose term limits, and let's say a council person decided to run for mayor, would that be considered two different offices? In other words, they could serve 2 terms if we went with 2 terms. Could they serve 2 terms as council and then 2 terms as mayor?
Yes, I think it would be attached to the office itself, that you could run, if you're going to say you can serve, that there are term limits, you could serve 2 terms as a council person and then choose to run for mayor and serve 2 terms as mayor.
Just in case we have any council that would be considering running for mayor, just wanted to make sure.
And I think if you implement term limits, that it is not going to be applicable until the time it has passed. It wouldn't, you wouldn't have lost some terms, until that law was actually passed.
Could we structure term limits to exempt current sitting council members? Or would it start the way you just said, whatever the number was, it would start the next time there was an election?
Well, the next time there was an election, yes, I think you could, if we pass this new charter in 2018, I think you could say that the term limits provision became effective beginning with any elections that took place in 2019. But can you exempt the sitting board of council from ever complying with the term limits? I'd say that you'd be taking I don't see the
I
legislature
didn't really
passing
mean
that.
to word it that way to begin with. I
Right.
meant, would it start?
Yeah, I think you would
For
have to
instance,
start it
if
in
I
the,
ran for re-election and.
I think you'd have to start it at some point in the future that it
be
becomes
my first-
applicable.
Okay. That was my question.
Good comments. Any other suggestions or thoughts? Okay.
We still got Leslie?
Councilman McPherson? Anything else from you?
Probably not till the next meeting.
Okay. All right, and our next meeting is, Tom, when is our next meeting, or January 24th, for those watching via our satellite, hopefully it's up and everybody's watching.
That's our work session, isn't it?
Public hearing is when, what's that date? January 24th. Okay. And for those of you watching or that will watch this later, please contact your city council person or myself. Send in your suggestions you have heard tonight, that we will read those into the record, and we certainly appreciate everybody's opinion, and we want to hear from everybody on this. This is very important for our city moving forward, and I think everybody should weigh in and have a chance to be heard. Any other discussion on the charter?
So we're meeting on the 24th of this month.
That's correct.
She's asked us to
We
set a
don't
time.
have a time.
We don't have a time. Anybody want to throw out a time?
So
Since
Wednesday.
it's a public comment, I would just suggest that we make it at 6 rather than 3, so we give some people time to actually come home from work.
Church night.
6 o'clock,
That
okay with everybody?
That is a church night.
Good on Wednesday night. Good
Okay.
job. Which one?
All right, 6 o'clock.
She got Bible study.
Sir?
She got Bible study.
Yeah, I don't count, so do it to them.
Next
Okay.
Wednesday.
127.
No. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
candy.
Hearing now, we will move on to tab B, which is executive session. Do I hear a motion that we adjourn into executive session?
In the state matter.
I make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss or to vote to enter into an option to purchase, dispose of, or lease real estate subject to approval in a subsequent public vote as provided in Georgia Code Section 50.14.3BIE.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, I would like to read into the record, the Councilman McPherson will be participating in executive session, but she will affirm that, that no one else is in a position to hear her conversation. Is that correct? Councilman McPherson, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? We are in executive session.